There is a substance that stands between you and the memory of who you are. Not a pill, not a chemical in a bottle, but a subtle frequency, a veil, that blurs the edges of your attention, anchors your certainty in small things, and makes the deeper knowing feel distant or impossible. If you have ever been inches away from an insight and then felt it slip like mist through your fingers, you have already brushed against this substance. In 1945, near the Nile, a cache of texts surfaced that changed the way some people read the story of early Christianity. The manuscripts found at Nag Hammadi include writings like the Gospel of Philip, writings that speak plainly about memory, of original home, and of techniques for recognition, practices the mainstream consolidation of orthodoxy later sidelined. These texts do not replace canonical scripture. They sit beside it, as evidence of alternative currents that circulated in the same early waters. They also point to something practical, a map for checking, right here in your body, signs that can help you recognize whether a deeper orientation is present. Before we get to that map, understand this. The veil I call the substance is not neutral. It is sustained by structures, by attentional habits, by cultural patterns, and by intelligent forces described in those same texts as archons, that keep fragments from remembering their origin. The story the Gnostic tradition tells is simple in its sweep. A primordial source, the monad, sends sparks of knowing into the world. A secondary architect, the demiurge, builds a realm intended to anchor those sparks, and agents or patterns, archons, maintain an interference field that muffles recognition. The consequence is not doom, but delay. The inner remembering, anamnesis, is there, but it can be obscured. If what I've said registers with you, and if you sense even a small curiosity or pull as we go through this, write the single word recognition in the comments. It helps others know they are not alone. Now, lean in. This will be both a short history and a practical bodily exercise. I will speak plainly about the vocabulary, monad, demiurge, archons, and then guide you through simple checks that anyone can do, gently and without medical claim. These checks are phenomenological. They look for felt confirmation, a kind of somatic resonance that some seekers experience and describe as recognition. You may feel something clear, or you may notice nothing at all. Both responses are informative. The discovery at Nag Hammadi was not a conspiracy fiction. It was an accident of preservation and a mirror to a more complex early conversation about spirit and matter. The Gospel of Philip and other texts assert that knowledge, gnosis, is not merely intellectual assent, but an awakened remembering, a shift in how presence is felt. As ecclesial authorities consolidated power, certain texts and practices were excluded from emerging orthodox collections, in part because they suggested a direct, interior path to verification that could bypass institutional mediation. That historical sidelining matters because it shaped which modes of spiritual knowing were legitimized in public life and which were relegated to the margins. When you hear me talk about suppression, hear it as an explanation for why some techniques were less visible, not as an invitation to hatred. The point is practical. There are preserved hints of practices aimed at awakening memory, and they are worth testing in your own experience. The cosmology at the heart of these texts offers a metaphorical map more than a literal blueprint. The monad is the ultimate source, the ground from which consciousness first arises. Sparks of that source are scattered into the world. The demiurge is the craftsman of the visible domain, a builder who arranges forms, laws, and identities. Between the sparks and their recognition of origin, the archons operate, not all powerful demons in a sensational sense, but intelligences, patterns, frequencies that distract, sow doubt, and build habitual loops of attention. The substance I name is the field these archons ride, a low-frequency veil that dulls the clarity you were born with. It does so by persistent tactics. It shifts your attention to the immediate, amplifies small fears into paralyzing doubts, and produces an automatic inner commentary that steals momentum at precisely the moment awareness wants to widen. How does this substance show up in everyday life? Imagine you stand to speak about something you deeply know, and suddenly your voice thins, your throat tightens, and your thought fragments into a string of self-criticisms. Imagine you have a clear flash of insight while walking, only to lose it as soon as you try to describe it. Or you wake certain that a decision is right and then become flooded with reasons to doubt. These are small, ordinary examples of how the veil works, by creating impedance between a felt knowing and your ability to claim it. It has no interest in drama. It prefers the quiet work of distraction. It is present in the pull of social media, in the habitual rush to explain away intuition, and in the habitual habit of arguing with the felt body rather than listening to it. Yet the Gnostic path insists that recognition is not only possible but verifiable. That verification is not a clinical test. It is a felt confirmation. The texts point to 3 bodily loci, 3 marks, that often serve as a map for this remembering. They are not diagnostic in a medical sense, and they do not function as universal proof for everyone. Think of them instead as attunement points, areas of the body where, when attention is steadied, some people experience a resonance that feels like recognition. The first is at the base of the skull, where the head meets the neck, a place ancient authors sometimes associate with origin or birth. The second mark is along the lateral edge of the hand, the outer line that runs from the little finger side toward the wrist, a place linked with perception and reception. The third is in the center of the chest near the sternum, a place associated with voice, command, and inner authority. Descriptions from seekers vary. One person may feel a warmth, another a pressure, another a luminous subtlety like a tiny current. Many feel nothing at all. All of that is valid. If you decide to try a self-check, do it gently and with curiosity. These are optional, non-invasive gestures meant to bring attention inward. Do not treat them as a medical exam. They are about noticing. Begin by settling your posture. Sit comfortably, feet on the ground if possible, spine upright but relaxed. Allow your eyes to soften. Take a breath in through the nose and let out slowly through the mouth. Again, breathe in and out. Let your awareness come home to the body. Now, if you are willing, bring the fingertips of one hand to the base of your skull, at the place where skull meets neck. Use light pressure, a touch that is attentive but not forceful. Breathe naturally. As you rest your fingers there, notice qualities without naming them. Warmth, coolness, a sense of openness, a subtle pressure, or even nothing at all. If anything arises, a shift in taste, a movement of attention, a tiny release in the jaw, simply register it. Do not deduce meaning from it. Say to yourself quietly, I am noticing. If nothing is felt, note the absence, no sensation now. That is information too. When you lift your hand, allow the memory of that attention to linger. Next, bring attention to the lateral side of the same hand, the edge that runs from the little finger down toward the wrist. You can trace with your fingertips along that outer line, or simply rest the fingertips there. Again, breathe. This point is associated in the tradition with perception, with the capacity to receive the unexpected. Notice if there is any tingling, pressure, or an ease of attention. Some people report an expansion in peripheral awareness as they rest here. Others report nothing but a steady calm. Either way, hold that observation without turning it into proof. The quality of your noticing is the cue. Finally, place your hand, or both hands if you prefer, over the center of your chest, where the sternum sits. Rest the palm lightly, and allow the breath to move under your hand. This is a place associated with voice and command in the tradition. When people feel something here, they sometimes describe a small activation, a quality that invites speech from within. Notice whether your breathing changes, whether there is tightness, or whether a sense of inner stillness appears. Again, refrain from demanding a particular result. Observe. You may choose now, as an optional ritual, to speak a short affirmation aloud or silently. There is a 9-word formula preserved in later retellings of these practices that functions as a concise declaration. I remember my origin. I open perception. I command. Say it if it feels right. Repeat it once or twice at most, without expectation. Treat it as a tool of attention, a way to gather your focus and invite the felt recognition. If speaking aloud is uncomfortable, hold it in your mind with clear intention. The phrase is not a magic incantation guaranteed to change the world. It is a ritualized pointer that concentrates your attention toward the inner coordinates the tradition names. As you do these checks, notice what happens next in the theater of your mind. Very often, a predictable storm of doubt will arise. You might hear yourself thinking, "This is placebo. I'm being suggestible. This is woo." Or an inner committee may produce memories of ridicule, or the voice that protects you might label the whole experiment as foolish. In the Gnostic language, these reflexive doubts are precisely the archontic response in miniature. Archons win by manufacturing immediate, believable objections that pull you back into the same old grooves of attention. When a skeptical thought appears, try a simple move. Observe it as an event, give it a name like thought or archon, and don't follow it. Labeling does not mean denying the thought. It means creating a small distance so you do not identify with every mental event. Return your attention to the felt surface, the base of the skull, the outer hand, the center chest, and the breath that accompanies them. Repeat this cycle. Feel, observe, notice objections, label, and return. Over time, repetition weakens the extraordinary pull of that first skeptical jolt. You will not necessarily be immune to future doubts, but you will build the ability to hold an inner sensation without needing to narrate or disprove it. It is important to clarify what this practice is not. It is not a medical test. The presence or absence of any sensation should not be used to diagnose health conditions or to make clinical decisions. If you have concerns about your physical well-being, consult an appropriate professional. The checks I describe are phenomenological, tools to help you notice what your own nervous system has to say about presence, not instruments that reveal biological truths. Some people will report clear, astonishing shifts. Others will report quiet neutrality. Many will notice subtle differences over time, an increased capacity to sit with sensation without immediately explaining it away. All of those responses are part of a healthy inner process. Expect variability. In the Gnostic frame, the pneumatikoi, those who are responsive to spirit, often show certain sensitivities. But the texts also acknowledge gradations. Some sparks are more dormant than others. Some fragments have been long embedded in patterns of attention that need patient disentangling. If you felt nothing today, that is not failure. It is a datum. Keep practicing with a soft curiosity. The more you exercise simple attention without hostility, the more likely it is you will notice subtle shifts in your lived experience. A word about the politics of knowledge. The reason I say these practices were not widely taught is not so much a cult conspiracy as practical control. When a tradition offers a way for a person to verify their own experience, the role of intermediaries changes. Institutions that rely on hierarchical mediation tend to prefer paths that preserve their centrality. Historically, some early texts and techniques were marginalized because they encouraged direct verification rather than doctrinal obedience. That said, this is not an invitation to animosity. The point is strategic. Understanding why some doors were closed helps explain why you might be hearing about these things now in quieter circles. The rediscovery of texts like those at Nag Hammadi opened a possibility that some ancient currents carried methods expressly designed to awaken memory, and that these methods can be approached respectfully and tested in the laboratory of your own experience. When you practice, cultivate a gentle, experimental attitude. The archontic interference often tries to provoke either grandiosity or despair. Either you're instantly enlightened or you're obviously nothing. Both extremes are part of the same trick. A steadier path is to seek small confirmations, a small clarity sustained for a minute, a subtle easing in the throat, a slight widening of vision. Over time, these increments compound. They do not produce instant transcendence, but they produce an altered baseline. You begin to inhabit your presence differently. Community matters. Recognition is not meant to be an isolated affair. The ancient paths were communal in their circulation. They relied on witnesses who could confirm a person's experience not as legal proof, but as lived testimony. If you felt something at any point during these checks, you can leave the single-word comment recognition below. That helps form a network of mutual acknowledgement, a small public signature that others may find encouraging. If you notice skepticism arising, if you are puzzled by the lack of sensation, note that here too. Collective accounts do not replace individual verification, but they provide a mirror. When others report related patterns, your own experience is less likely to be dismissed as idiosyncratic. There will be practical friction. You will probably encounter friends or family who find the language foreign or who are worried about labels. Use discretion. This is not about conversion. It is about exploring an inner reality. Speak about your experience in ordinary language. I tried a body-based attention practice. I felt a subtle shift in my throat. Such reports invite curiosity rather than debate. If pressed, remember that the checks are optional, and the language of monad, demiurge, or archons is metaphorical, ways to name recurring patterns of distraction and control. Before we close, return one more time to those 3 points with soft attention. Place your fingers again at the base of the skull, at the lateral hand, and over the center chest, in whatever sequence feels natural. Breathe, notice, and if it helps, say to yourself the 9-word declaration softly. I remember my origin. I open perception. I command. Make the words a rhythm that supports steadiness in the body, rather than a demand on the mind. If something shifts, note it without immediate interpretation. If nothing shifts, note the calm that can come from steady, non-judgmental attention. The substance that blocks your consciousness is weakened by another substance. Recognition. Recognition is not argument, nor is it a showy demonstration. It is a quiet settling into a felt fact that, once known, refracts the rest of life differently. When you practice verifying, even in small degrees, dependence on intermediaries loosens and the scattered fragments begin to recollect. This is not a claim that everyone will have the same result. It is an invitation to experiment with your own nervous system, with humility, patience, and curiosity. If anything in this guidance moved you, if you felt a nuance, a glint, a small rearrangement in how attention landed, leave recognition in the comments. Your single word tells others they are not alone and helps a small community notice itself forming. If you want to go deeper in future videos, where we will explore related activations and subtler somatic practices drawn from these early currents, subscribe and stay connected. There will be further exercises to support steadying attention, ways to work with the predictable doubts, and explorations of how communal recognition reinforces individual memory. The title of this message names the problem and the promise. The substance that blocks your consciousness is real in the sense that you can experience its effects. It is not an external chemical so much as a sustained pattern of interference that dulls inner seeing. The remedy begins with simple, verifiable attention. The disciplined return to body points, to breath, to the tiny affirmations that gather focus. Over time, those small acts of recognition weaken the veil. Keep the experiment gentle. Keep your curiosity honest. And remember, the point is not to prove anything to anyone, but to learn from what your own presence tells you. Go ahead, try the checks again in a quiet moment, and if you felt anything, share recognition below. Subscribe to continue exploring this path. There is more ahead for those who want to practice together. Whatever you felt today, warmth, emptiness, a flicker, or nothing at all, treat it as the beginning of a patient, embodied inquiry. The veil does not have to be permanent. The work of anamnesis is simply the slow, steady reclaiming of what has always been yours.